Here is part one of your Richard Wolff script. Note, due to output limits, this script is approximately 8,500 characters. This covers the introduction and historical context of the crisis. I can generate the next section immediately upon request to reach your 22,000 character goal. Welcome, friends, to another discussion of the economic events that are shaping our lives, our jobs, and the future of this system we call global capitalism. Today, we must turn our attention to a development so seismic, so fundamentally transformative, that the mainstream press in the United States is struggling to even find the vocabulary to describe it. They are calling it a diplomatic pivot. They are calling it a trade dispute. But let us be very clear about what has actually happened. The United Kingdom, the supposed unsinkable aircraft carrier of American interests in Europe, the junior partner in the so-called special relationship, has just severed the artery. The London-Ottawa Accords are not just a treaty, they are an obituary. They are the obituary for the American century. For decades, we have been told a story. It is a story that comforts the elites in Washington and Wall Street. It is the story that the United States is the indispensable nation, the sun around which all other capitalist satellites must orbit. We were told that while nations might squabble at the end of the day, when the chips are down, the Anglosphere, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, would always align with the United States. That assumption was the bedrock of global security and the global financial system since 1945, and as of this week, that bedrock has cracked. It has crumbled. What we are witnessing with the creation of this Commonwealth common market, this fortress of 56 nations, is not a sudden betrayal. It is the inevitable result of a capitalist system that ruthlessly seeks stability and profit regardless of loyalty. You see, capitalism has no loyalty to flags. It has no loyalty to history. It has loyalty only to the expansion of value. And the shrewd technocrats in London, in Ottawa, and in Canberra, led by the maneuvering of Mark Carney, have looked at the United States and they have made a cold, hard calculation. They have looked at the debt ceilings, the political paralysis, the crumbling infrastructure, and the erratic, coercive foreign policy of Washington, and they have decided that the United States is a bad investment. Let us look at the specifics of this betrayal because the details matter. This isn't just about selling fewer cars to America. This is about the fundamental architecture of the global economy. The Commonwealth Common Market is being constructed as a closed loop. 56 nations. That is 1/3 of the global population. It includes some of the fastest growing economies in the world in Africa and Southeast Asia. It includes the resource giants of Canada and Australia, and they have decided to build a wall. But this time, the wall is not to keep immigrants out of the United States. It is to keep the United States out of the Commonwealth. The document that outlines this shift, the London-Ottawa Accords, is a fascinating piece of economic warfare. It speaks of strategic autonomy. When a capitalist power speaks of strategic autonomy, what they mean is they no longer trust the hegemon to protect their supply chains. They are terrified, and they should be. They have watched the United States weaponize the dollar. They have watched sanctions be applied not just to enemies, but to allies who dare to step out of line. And the Commonwealth nations have said enough. They are creating a unified customs union, a single regulatory zone, and perhaps most dangerously for the U.S., a shared defense and intelligence framework that explicitly excludes Washington. Think about what this means for the average American worker. We are not just talking about geopolitics here. We are talking about the minerals in your phone. We are talking about the rare earths in the electric vehicle batteries that we are told are the future of the auto industry. The Commonwealth controls the vast majority of these resources. Canada and Australia alone are mining superpowers. Under these new accords, those resources are prioritized for the internal market of the Commonwealth. The United States goes to the back of the line. The prices of everything from electronics to energy in the US will face upward pressure not because of inflation in the abstract, but because the US has lost its privileged position at the trough of global resources. Now, why did this happen? Why now? We have to look at the dialectic here. We have to look at the contradictions. The United States has spent the last 30 years demanding that the world open its markets to American capital. Free trade, they said. Globalization, they said. But the moment globalization started to benefit other centers of power, the moment China rose, or the moment the Commonwealth decided to organize, the United States turned to protectionism. The US said, we want free trade, but only if we win. And the rest of the world is not stupid. Mark Carney is not stupid. He understands the dynamics of capital accumulation. He saw that the United States was becoming a liability. The role of Mark Carney here is pivotal and instructive. He represents the transnational capitalist class par excellence. He is not a politician in the traditional sense. He is a manager of the system. He served the Bank of England. He served the Bank of Canada. He understands that for capitalism to survive in the UK and Canada, it needs a new host. The American host is dying. It is consumed by internal strife and debt. So, like a virus seeking a new organism, the capital interests of the Commonwealth have decided to form their own body. They have looked at the 56 nations of the Commonwealth, a relic of the British Empire, let us be honest, and they have decided to reanimate the corpse. But this isn't the British Empire of pith helmets and tea. This is a resource cartel. It is an OPEC for everything else. The exclusion of the United States from the Five Eyes intelligence sharing, turning it into the Three Eyes of the UK, Canada, and Australia, is perhaps the most symbolic blow. For 70 years, the U.S. intelligence apparatus has been the nervous system of the West. Now, the limbs have decided to cut off the head. They are saying that American intelligence is compromised, that American politics are too volatile to be trusted with the secrets of the Commonwealth. This is a vote of no confidence in the American state apparatus, unlike anything we have ever seen. And what is the American response? Bluster, threats. We hear the usual suspects in Washington demanding tariffs, demanding sanctions against the UK. Imagine that. The United States sanctioning the United Kingdom. It would be a comedy if the consequences weren't so tragic for the working class. Because who pays for these trade wars? Who pays when the supply chains fracture? It is not the Mark Carneys of the world. It is the worker in Ohio, the pensioner in Florida, whose purchasing power is eroded because the dollar is no longer the golden ticket to global commerce. This fortress commonwealth is designed to be self-sufficient in food, in energy, and in defense technology. They are bypassing the U.S. military-industrial complex. They are developing their own interoperable standards. This is a direct threat to the profits of Boeing, of Raytheon, of Lockheed Martin. And when the profits of those corporations are threatened, the U.S. state lashes out. We are entering a period of profound danger. The declining empire does not go gently into the good night. It strikes out. But we must dig deeper into the history. How did the UK, a nation that has spent the last decade isolating itself from Europe via Brexit, suddenly manage to orchestrate the largest trade bloc in history? It is because the contradictions of Brexit left them no choice. They could not survive alone. They could not return to Europe. and they realized that subordination to the US was a dead end. So they turned to the old map. They looked at the pink bits on the globe from 1920. This is the irony of history. The ghost of the British Empire has returned, not as a conqueror, but as a survival mechanism for British and Canadian capital. They are selling this to their people as a new era of prosperity. Global Britain, they call it. But make no mistake, for the working class in the Commonwealth, this will mean tightened belts. It will mean militarization of their economies to defend this new fortress. The document mentions a highly militarized agreement. That means money that could have gone to the National Health Service in the UK or to housing in Canada will instead be poured into a new unified Commonwealth Defense Force to protect shipping lanes that the US Navy used to patrol. The costs of maintaining the empire of capital are being shifted from the US taxpayer to the Commonwealth taxpayer. And for the United States, this is the nightmare scenario. The US strategy has always been divide and conquer, keep Europe dependent, keep the Anglosphere loyal, keep the global South disorganized. This agreement fails on all counts. It unifies the Anglosphere against the US. It organizes the global South within the Commonwealth structure. It creates a competitor that speaks English, uses similar legal systems, and understands the US playbook perfectly. It is, in many ways, the child killing the parent. We must also talk about the London-Ottawa Accords in the context of the US dollar. If this Commonwealth bloc begins to trade internally using a basket of their own currencies, or a digital ledger system that bypasses SWIFT, which is implied in the financial independence clauses, then the demand for US dollars collapses. The exorbitant privilege of the United States, the ability to print money to pay for imports, relies on everyone else needing dollars. If 56 nations, including major economies, say no thank you, we will trade in our own credits, the value of the dollar plummets. Import prices in the US skyrocket. The standard of living, which has been artificially propped up by the dollar's dominance, corrects downwards brutally. This is the structural violence of the situation. It is not a war with guns yet. It is a war of ledger entries, of trade protocols, of resource allocation, and the United States has been caught sleeping. They assumed that the cultural ties, the shared history of W2 would bind the UK to them forever. But as Marx taught us, the economic base determines the political superstructure. When the economic interests diverged, the political alliance snapped. The UK and Canada need to export raw materials and secure finished goods. The US has become a competitor in oil and gas and a protectionist barrier for goods. The economic logic dictated the split. So when you see the headlines, do not think of this as a temporary spat between a prime minister and a president. This is a structural realignment of the capitalist world system. We are moving from a unipolar world dominated by the US, not to a multipolar world of chaos, but to a world of rival blocs. The Commonwealth bloc, the Eurasian bloc, and the isolated American fortress. The irony is palpable. The US wanted to build a fortress to keep the world out, and the world has obliged by building a fortress to keep the US in. In the coming sections, we are going to explore exactly how this impacts the technology sector, the specific breakdown of the military alliance, and what this means for the future of socialism and the labor movement in this fractured world. But for now, understand this: the map has changed. The assumptions of the last 80 years are void. The Commonwealth has closed its gates, and the United States is on the outside looking in. This is the new reality. And it is a reality that capitalism itself created through its endless, voracious drive for self preservation, eating its own children and its own parents alike. Here is part two of your Richard Wolff script. Note, this section concludes the topic, focusing on the specific economic fallout, the intelligence rupture, and the systemic implications for the working class. We have established the geopolitical earthquake. We have established that the map has been redrawn. But now we must descend from the high altitudes of diplomacy and look at what this means on the ground. We have to look at the grocery store. We have to look at the gas pump. We have to look at your paycheck, because unless we ground this in the material reality of everyday life, it remains an abstraction. And capitalism, my friends, is never abstract. It is a system of very real, very brutal consequences. The first and most immediate impact of this fortress commonwealth will be felt in the wallet of every single American worker. You see, for decades, the United States has enjoyed what economists call exorbitant privilege. It meant we could import cheap goods from anywhere, pay for them with printed dollars, and keep inflation relatively low. That era is over, when the Commonwealth nations, who control vast swaths of the world's strategic resources, from Canadian lumber to Australian lithium to African cobalt, prioritize their own internal market. The United States goes from being the VIP customer to the customer standing outside in the rain. What happens when the supply of critical inputs restricts? Prices go up. It is the law of supply and demand, the most basic tenet of the market. But this isn't just inflation in the way the Federal Reserve talks about it. This is structural scarcity. When General Motors in Detroit cannot get the specific alloy they need because it is being routed to a factory in Birmingham or Melbourne, they don't just pay more. They stop the line. They furlough the workers. The cost is passed on to you twice, once in the price of the car and once in the lost wages of the American working class. We are looking at a future of stagflation on steroids, stagnant wages combined with skyrocketing costs for essentials. And let us talk about the financial dimension, because this is where the London-Ottawa Accords truly aim a dagger at the heart of American hegemony. If this new bloc begins to settle its trade in a basket of currencies that excludes the US dollar, which is explicitly hinted at in the financial sovereignty clauses, the demand for dollars evaporates. Billions, perhaps trillions of dollars currently held in reserve banks around the world will come flooding back home. And when that happens, the value of the dollar collapses relative to other currencies. Suddenly, that cheap television from abroad is not so cheap. The coffee you drink in the morning, double the price. The clothes on your back, triple. The standard of living in the United States has been artificially propped up by the world's willingness to hold our debt. If Mark Carney and his technocrats have decided that U.S. debt is toxic assets, then the U.S. government can no longer borrow cheaply to fund its military or its meager social programs. Interest rates will spike. Mortgages will become unaffordable for millions more than they already are. The American dream, already on life support, will be officially pronounced dead. Now, I want to turn to a specific aspect of this betrayal that has the security state in Washington in a panic: the Three Eyes. For 70 years, the Five Eyes intelligence alliance, US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, was the nervous system of Western capitalism. It was how they tracked dissent, how they tracked markets, how they maintained order. By kicking the US out and forming a Three Eyes Pact, the Commonwealth is blinding the giant. Intelligence is not just about James Bond, it is about economic foresight. It is about knowing where the next resource shortage will be. It is about knowing which government is about to fall. When the US loses access to the data streams of London and Canberra, American corporations lose their early warning system. They will be flying blind into global markets. They will make miscalculations. They will invest in the wrong places. And when those investments fail, who pays? Do the CEOs take a pay cut? Of course not. They lay off the workers. They cut benefits. The intelligence failure becomes a crisis of employment. Furthermore, we must anticipate the phenomenon of capital flight. Capital is a coward. It has no patriotism. It has no flag. It runs away from risk and it runs towards safety. If the Commonwealth looks stable, organized, and resource rich, while the United States looks chaotic, isolated, and debt-ridden, where do you think the Apples, the Googles, and the JP Morgans of the world will move their operations? They will shift their headquarters to Toronto. They will move their research centers to London. They will leave the hollowed-out shell of the American economy behind. And how will American politicians respond? We know the playbook. They will try to bribe them to stay. We will see a race to the bottom. States like Ohio, Texas, and California will offer even bigger tax breaks, even more deregulation, even more attacks on unions, desperate to keep capital from fleeing to the fortress Commonwealth. They will say, look, we can be just as profitable as they are. We will suppress our workers just as hard. It will be a competition in austerity, and the loser in every scenario is the person who works for a living. But I want to end on a critical point. It is easy to look at this and say, the Commonwealth is the enemy. It is easy to fall into the trap of nationalism. You will hear politicians in Washington screaming about British betrayal and calling for tariffs and boycotts. They will try to rally you around the flag. They will tell you that we must all sacrifice to make America strong again against this new threat. Do not be fooled. This is not a fight between the American people and the British people. This is a fight between two gangs of capitalists. It is a fight between the decline of one empire and the rise of another. The workers in the Commonwealth are not your enemy. In fact, they are facing the exact same struggle you are. To build this fortress, their leaders are going to demand militarization. They are going to cut their social safety nets to pay for new navies and new cyber defense systems. They are being exploited by Mark Carney just as you are being exploited by Wall Street. The formation of the Commonwealth bloc is a sign that global capitalism is fracturing. It is eating itself. It can no longer maintain a unified global market, so it is retreating into armed camps. This is exactly what happened in the early 20th century, and we know where that leads. It leads to trade wars, which lead to shooting wars. The only way out of this trap is not to pick a side between the U.S. fortress and the Commonwealth fortress. The answer is to realize that the fortress itself is the problem. The answer is international solidarity from below. We need to reach out to the workers in the UK, in Canada, in Nigeria, in India, and say, we refuse to play this game. We refuse to be the foot soldiers in an economic war between billionaires. If the London-Ottawa Accords prove anything, it is that the ruling class is organized. They can rewrite the rules of the global economy overnight to protect their profits. If they are organized, we must be organized. We must demand an economy that is not based on competition between nations, but on cooperation between peoples. We must demand a system where resources are shared based on human need, not hoarded behind tariff walls and carrier strike groups. The American century is over. The Commonwealth century is trying to be born, but neither of them offers a future for the majority of us. That future has to be built by us against them. That is the lesson of this crisis. That is the work we have to do. Thank you for joining me. I hope this analysis has been helpful.